Welcome, Catherine, to This is 50 Freedom Through Passions. I am super excited to have you today because for everybody that's listening, I actually met Catherine on Instagram, believe it or not, and she ended up becoming my business coach. We spent a full day doing a VIP strategy session, and now she's on my podcast. So it goes to show you how the internet can actually bring together relationships and business relationships. And I'm super excited for you to be on the show today, Catherine. So welcome.
Oh, Lynette, thank you so much. I was so happy you reached out on Instagram and that our conversation turned into both this conversation, which I'm so excited to be here today, and our coaching session. The whole thing has been, I don't know, serendipitous in my book.
Exactly. Well, I think how it went was we did a pre-call. I reached out to you. Do you want to be on my podcast? We did a pre-call and you had mentioned that you do these VIP strategy days. And I thought, oh my God, I actually love that idea and I want to actually do one. So we did that first and then now we're doing the recording. So Catherine, give us a little bit of a background, sort of like your backstory, before we get started.
Okay, thank you so much. So we share something in common. We're fellow Canadians. So I'm originally from Canada and I've been living in the United States for a very long time. I started my career here in the US working for a Fortune 500 company in the technology space. So I was very fortunate with them. They love to grow via acquisition. So I had a lot of exposure within the company. I moved around the country. I was able to move up through the ranks and really work on interesting projects and get a lot of exposure just to sort of business as general and in general. And towards the end of my time with them, I made a one more move, but towards the end of that time, I was running a business unit focused on high-end Hewlett-Packard systems at the time. Probably date myself here, but it was a very sort of comprehensive role in that our customers were actually resellers of the products, and I was responsible for, and my team was, for making sure we had everything to actually build these systems in our warehouse, and we had to create marketing programs for the resellers, and I needed to make sure I had the resources to run this team. So I had to create a P&L, profit and loss, which I know we're going to talk about numbers at some point, and
Yeah.
actually take it to like the, president of our division and then fight for, and explain the reasoning for what I needed. And so it was just a really awesome experience just working for this company. I eventually left them. At the time I was living in San Francisco and I had been with the company quite a long time, and I had friends that were going to a software startup in downtown San Francisco, and they wanted me to come on and build out a worldwide reseller channel for them. And so I think it was just the right time. And so I made that leap, and that was my first of a series of startups. And I was with them for, it was probably almost 2 years. And then the company actually sold, which was a great outcome. Sold to quite a large company. It was a great product. We just think got a bit out over our skis, as we would say, in terms of spend. And after that, I had been working a lot and for a very long time. So I decided to just sort of downshift a little bit, driving a car analogy. And I traveled, and I had been doing a lot of traveling with this startup worldwide, but it just took some time for me. And then I decided at the time I started writing, like I actually found time to pursue passions and interests that I had just been putting aside for a very long time. And I decided that I was not well read. My undergraduate degree was in chemical engineering, so it didn't, there was not a lot of literature involved in that. So I decided at the age of 40 to go back to school. And I applied, I did all, and I decided to go back to school somewhere where I actually wanted to maybe live for a year. So I decided on London because I had been there a few times and loved it. And I looked at all the schools, and I found a program that was 12 months, 2 months of semester coursework, and 2 semesters of coursework, and then a semester writing a dissertation, and tried to scrounge up my transcripts and applied and actually got in. So I went and did this, and I hadn't written a lot of essays. I hadn't read most of the requirements that we needed to read throughout, but it was honestly an awesome experience for me. I learned how to really think through critically and explain things, and put my writing is so much stronger now because I had to convey ideas and my thoughts in writing. So the whole thing was frankly awesome. So when
Yeah.
not that it was difficult for me, I
Yeah.
was probably a lot of my classmates just came out of undergraduate programs. So it was interesting, but I had a really great group of people of all ages, and I loved that aspect of it. So then I decided to move to New York and ended up at a couple of more startups, one through some of the colleagues that I had when I was at the Fortune 500 company, and then another after that that was in the fashion technology space. And with that, it was great. I was the COO of the business. The founder had really great ideas. We pivoted, we pitched to VCs to try and raise money. Unfortunately, we weren't successful. And so at the time that closed, because our angel, the person who had been funding us, basically said, okay, enough, which was difficult for all of us. But I closed up shop, swept the floors, and the PR firm that we had been using, we had been doing fashion industry events in order to raise awareness of our original idea. The PR firm, she was a boutique agency in New York, and she wanted to pivot everything about her business, like everything in terms of she didn't want to be working in fashion anymore and focusing on that market. She wanted to change the look and feel. She wanted to change the service offerings. Social media was getting going. So she hired me to help her with that process. And that was my first consulting client. And that was 10 years ago.
Okay.
So that was sort of how I got to this point of working with founders to help them, sometimes launch outright, but then pivot and grow. And even with her, we moved her. I worked with her off and on for 10 years. So we moved her to the other coast. She wanted to launch a product business. So we kept her PR firm going, and, while she was transitioning to launching this product based business. And then she started adding service offerings onto the products that she originally launched. So that's an example of somebody that I worked with for a long time, but all of my business was word of mouth. For a while, because my West Coast connections were a bit stronger, I was going out to LA a lot because my clients were out there. And it was a great way to move through business. So that sort of got me up to COVID. And I shifted a little bit then, but I'll pause to see if where you would like to go next, because that was a lot.
Yeah, no, that's great. I know, and I love that. And so when you were in the startup of world in San Francisco, I mean, that was like the creme de la creme, like way back in the day when, if you wanted to go and make it big, you went to San Francisco and you did a startup. Is that kind of the time zone that you were in?
That was kind of the time's up. Yes, before the bottom fell out of everything, right? So yes,
Exactly.
yes, and it was everybody, VCs throwing money around and people
Yeah.
expanding and all of it. So yeah, it was interesting, and sort of what was interesting about this startup, we weren't down in Silicon Valley. We were actually downtown San Francisco in the financial district. So
Yeah.
yes, and I was living
But
in the
still the vibe of Silicon Valley is kind of creeping.
total.
It's kind of tentacles everywhere. Yeah, no, that would have been a really exciting, crazy time for sure. So you're 40 years old and you've probably, half retired, half, okay, at least now I've got I'm in a situation now where I can like sort of take a step back and reevaluate where I'm at. And I think that a lot of women in their 40s and 50s and beyond start to think, well, I'm too old.
Mm,
It's too late. Oh my God, I can't go back to school at 40. Like, I can't go back to school at 50. Like, are you nuts?
mm.
But I think that sort of upskilling and continually targeting education, I guess, throughout the years really is sort of the way to go. I mean, if you're not continually learning, and it was interesting how you said you didn't feel you were very well read. What was that in your mind? Why was that important?
I think because I was actually enjoying the writing process and I was taking classes, like I had signed up for a class and I would go across to the other side of the city and go to this class. And
Yeah,
I, I just felt it was for me, right? This is not even any sort of uh, commentary on anybody else. Sorry, I needed to find the right word. I
yeah,
really, for me, it was very important to have a better understanding. Like I felt literally like there was a gap and a huge piece missing in my brain. And
hmm,
it bothered me. And I really felt drawn. Like when had the idea, I'm like, "Well, why not?" Like, and I was in a position to be able to do it. And I could be gone for a year and I had the funds and I could, I mean, I budgeted and I knew what I wanted to spend. And I found a roommate who had a house that I was sharing and all of these things, right? Like I really thought it through, but I knew there was just something that I knew was the right move, and I think,
right,
and I would say, I mean, even now there's things I want to do and I still say, oh my God, I think I'm too old, right? Right. So I
right.
think my version of 40, now it's like, okay, well, now it's 50 something and I'm too old. Um, it's
What
almost,
is the underlying thought pattern behind that statement? Like, oh, I'm too old. So there, like you just said, there are other things I want to do, but I think, oh, I feel maybe I'm a little bit too old for that. What do you think causes us to think that way?
ooh, I think it's personal to each person and where they're at in their life. But I think in general, uh, it's probably a couple of things. One is how will other people perceive us, right? Like me being the
Mm,
oldest person in a classroom, for example. And the reality is nobody cared. And
yeah,
I think like we think people are thinking about us a lot more than they are. So, please don't stop. And I even have to remind myself of that often, but like they're not thinking about me. So, like, do the thing. And then I think the other piece is like, what if it doesn't work? Right? What if it
mhm,
isn't successful? And the reality is, though, you're never going to know. And if you don't take the shot, like you're missing it, right? Like you miss 100% of the
right.
shots you don't take. And as long as I think if you can try to identify what is the thing, like what is the fear, right? Is it money? Is it time? Is it, relationships? And then mitigate, be intelligent, dismiss the fears that are absolutely irrelevant because sometimes they are, like the one I just described, irrelevant. And then others, like, okay, great. Well, if it's a money thing, like, what is the budget then, right? Or how are you going to set aside the funds so that you can put yourself in a position to do it? I think taking a bit more of an analytical approach and really going inside and understanding what's going on helps get to the other side.
Exactly. And I think the number one thing you said there is like nobody's really thinking about you. Nobody is really like, oh, what is Catherine doing? Like, oh my God. I think when you're doing it, people are like, wow, that took a lot of courage. She's an inspiration. I mean, you're going to get the naysayers always, right? But I still believe that you just say less and do more, and I think when we talk to people and we try to get others inputs, we tend to like get swayed by their thinking and their fears that then stop us from going down that path.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, the one thing I would say there is, and I think it's helped me, is I don't tend to go like poll the whole universe before I make a decision. I tend to, get advice from really good counsel, but that's a very small group because for exactly the reason you said. Otherwise, it can deter you. So, anyways,
Exactly. And delay and delay and delay. Okay, so you graduate, you come back, you dabble in a couple of other sort of operating roles in some startups.
yes,
Um, Probably learned that you can't reinvent what was already done, or you can't, like I feel like sometimes when you try to go back to what you were doing, it doesn't feel right anymore and it gets a little super uncomfortable.
agreed. I agree with that. And what I think I found in the consulting business, I mean, I knew, I think when I moved to New York after graduating, I went and worked at startups. I knew I wanted to be working on my own, but I just wasn't quite. it wasn't working, right? I think the timing wasn't right, frankly. And I was really fortunate to still have two more solid opportunities to work at startups that, quite frankly, those experiences benefited me greatly. One of them just from a skill set standpoint, being COO at the fashion tech startup, like I was much more involved in marketing. I was much more involved in working on, okay, well, how are we talking about this product online? Like, developing and working with the development team that was outsourced on getting the website up. Things that I never would have known about. And
Exposed to.
yeah, be exposed to it exactly. So I was able to take, especially those last two experiences, and with everything else, the San Francisco startup, the Fortune 500 company, and then when I was able to go and start working with founders of very small businesses, sometimes solopreneurs, sometimes really small teams, I was really able, and I have been able to come in holistically and look at this whole business, and I think and do it in a way that I can see what the trigger points are and where the
Yeah.
opportunities are, and then what that right plan is to do, to get to where that founder wants to go.
And there within lies the advantage of keeping like continually going and trying to do something different in your 50s, your midlife, in midlife in
Yeah.
general,
Yes.
because that
Agreed.
is a perfect example of accumulating all this experience, all this knowledge, and this sort of spidey sense, this intuition that you're going to have now to bring it into something different. And you had this opportunity to then take this tech fashion, the PR lady, she wanted to, make a pivot in her business. And you're thinking, well, I know exactly what she needs to do because I've brought all this experience. And so therefore that's allowed you to, sort of take that experience and turn it into something you probably didn't even know you were intentionally going to do something like that. And I think when we think about starting a side hustle or pivoting into something different in midlife, we get so worried about, well, what should I do? What should I do? But again, and this is a common theme that comes up in almost every single interview, is as soon as you get down that path, stuff just starts showing up. And this lady, this woman showed up for you and allowed you to then take and say, hey, listen, I think I could coach her into pivoting from her business and getting into something new. That brought you to COVID. So now, what happens during COVID?
So during COVID, things got a little quieter, needless to say. And I was working with, I still, a few clients, and one that was really my largest client. I was started with a 3-month project, and it was 4 years later. The good news is we had grown her business, we had built out her team. I mean, I was brought in originally to help her find an executive assistant. By the way, the referral from, just so people know, from that very first client. So I, one of the things that happened then was with this client that I had been working with for 4 years, because we had also sold her business. It's amazing that I was still had a role on the team at the point, but what I learned was I wasn't happy anymore. And it's, I think, really important to listen to yourself. I wasn't happy anymore executing in my clients' businesses as actually part of their team, where I owned a functional responsibility or deliverable for that client. And I would take on that role, not for every client, but so it was a really difficult decision, but I realized that I needed to change how I was operating. And so I took a step back, very nicely parted way with this client, long runway. It was supposed to be a 3 month, and I think it ended up being 4, 2 or 3. It's fine, because I mean, I had a lot of brain trust in what was going on in the business. So I was able to help transition that. And I love her and I love the team. It just wasn't right for me anymore. And then I began, at the time I was always calling myself a consultant. And I said, well, I watched a YouTube video and an ad came on. And I'm not a YouTube ad person, right? And I'm like, oh, this is for this other client. I was watching and I'm like, no, I'm staying with this ad. This is for me. And it was around the ad, which then led to the webinar, which led to the online
Yeah.
program, right? Like I
You
was
got into
all
the funnel is what you did.
I was,
You were sucked into that funnel.
I was sucked into that funnel. It was effective. So it was how to start a course from scratch. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe this is I can take everything I've been doing and convert it into creating an online program. So one of the things I should mention is I did zero marketing for myself for the first 9 years I had my business. Like no Facebook, no Instagram, no email list. Everything just didn't do it. So this change required that I learn how to do some of the things I've been doing for
But
clients.
you were working on your network. Like that's the previous, your
Well,
previous
totally.
career, if you will, was all based on network,
All
correct?
networking. It was all
Yeah,
word of mouth, all client referral, beginning to end.
right.
Right? It was working. So why? And
Yeah,
also, I was doing for clients. I was helping them set up, email welcome sequences. I was helping them. I was doing all of those things. I just wasn't doing them for me.
exactly.
So I decided to take what I was doing for other people, start doing it for myself, and then sort of soup up, like learn more, right? Like, okay, well, how do I make a reel? And oh my God, I don't want to get on video. So found another fellow Canadian who was launching a program on about getting on video. I'm like, okay, well, it's not going to happen unless I invest in this. So I did, right? Like making smart investments and mapping out this program which was around launching your helping female founders launch a business. So I had a very small cohort in January of 2022 and took it was all very it was live. It was lessons I would teach. There would be homework to do and guiding these founders through product and service based, and it went well. I learned a lot. It's like, okay, well, what is this going to look like in the fall? Because it was too crammed. It was too truncated time wise. I wanted to record modules. I wanted to change up how I was doing it. And I didn't even do a webinar the first time. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the webinar. I was working with a coach because I needed some help through this process, and she was awesome, and she got me to the point. I'm doing the webinar and I'm doing all that, and it fell flat. It just didn't do well. And so I took a step back and work with the coach. Was like, okay, well, let's double down on what is working, right? Like who are your people, what's working, and really regrouped and focused on my one-to-one work, because that really, I mean, no matter what, like that was always my challenge even with the coaching, is like I really like the interaction. For me, that's where the juice comes and some of the magic, frankly, of what I'm
Hmm.
sharing, right? So what comes in. And so focused on the one-to-one work. And around that time too, I realized that I really needed to build out a new network, right? Because my network had sort of dried up a little bit. So I'm like, okay, I need to meet some
Right.
people. And I think also with COVID, it was a pretty lonely time, right? I live in an apartment in Brooklyn, New York,
Absolutely.
right? Like it was just, I was trying to go see family. I was trying to see friends. People had fled. So I started on Instagram, well, Facebook a little bit, but then shifted to Instagram, meeting people. I started doing candid conversations to level up your business, where I was interviewing founders of complementary services to what I do to help. So I was meeting people, and it forced me to meet more people. So I had more people to interview, and like we are here today. And
Yeah.
then I joined another consulting networking group, and all of these things started getting me going again, right? Which is really helpful, because sometimes you make changes, and the results don't happen overnight. Just
No.
frankly. So yeah, so now I'm in a really lovely place. I do VIP strategy sessions, which I know we'll talk more about, and then I
Yeah.
coach on a monthly basis clients one to one. I have some other, the ideas that I'm working on, but that's really the bulk of my
Yeah.
business. And I have a great, great group of clients. I'm super, including you. So it's been great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's get into that. So we have our pre-call for this podcast interview, and I realize Oh, wow. I mean, I really didn't know a lot about you. And so that's the reason why we have these pre-calls.
Yes.
And so I'm learning about your offer. I'm learning about this background of starting an online business and helping, founders, largely female founders. And the word growth, just you, I think I felt like you said it 100 times, but
Okay.
you probably only said it once.
Okay.
But it stuck so much in my mind because here's where I'm at in my business. I've got a lot of stuff going on. I've got the podcast, I've got my online program, I've got one-on-one coaching, I've got my daytime work that I work with corporates on, program
Yeah.
management, delivering strategies. And I feel like I feel good at where I'm at, but you said the word growth. It reminded me of my friend Katie, who she's also a growth strategist. And I thought to myself, I love that word. I just grabbed onto that word. And as somebody who has been, I feel like, working in my business for the last 3 years, where I've had a podcast, I've had my online program, plus my day, keep the lights on job,
Yes.
which I am a consultant and it's my own business. Um, I just thought, it's time. It's time to grow. And I don't know if it was serendipitous, as you said, but I hung on to that word like that was all you were saying. And so I thought, okay, I need to go and find somebody to help me do this, but I don't want to get into a monthly coaching situation. With all due respect, I've tried that before.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't work for me. I wanted to have a VIP session, and then you said it. It was just so wild. You're like, oh, and then I also do these VIP strategy sessions where I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. So tell the audience a little bit more about what I heard that
Okay.
I just grabbed onto it. I'm going to use this term like a dog with a bone. And I was like, I want to book one of those with you. And you were like, wait, what? I thought we were just doing this pre-call for this podcast. And so let's back up. And what is a VIP strategy? What is a growth strategist? Tell me about your business now.
Okay, great. By the way, I didn't know that all of that was going on in your head before I actually uttered the words VIP session. So,
Yeah, I know you didn't.
um, so many of the people that I work with are similar to you, where they do have all of these things going on, right? And everything's kind of working, and they know, like you, that there's somewhere that they want to be getting to. They know they want to grow their business. They know they want to grow their business partially to be living the life they want to be living. Super important. And they want to do it in a way that's profitable, right? Which then funds the way that they want to be living.
The freedom.
The freedom, right? Yes,
It funds
exactly.
the
Freedom
freedom.
through passions. This is 50, so exactly.
Exactly.
Right, right? Like, even for myself, I fund my life, and I fund my life so that I can be doing the things that I want to be doing. Right? I look so different to somebody else, and that's the thing I fully respect, right? Like, what is the life that you want to be building, and what is this business you want to be building, right? And that's different for everybody. And I loved your episode with Laura Ben, because towards the end of it, you went real, and you got into that discussion with her around, like, being a CEO of your business. For her, it looked different than it might look for somebody else, right? And
Absolutely.
and you can be, I think it's good to be inspired, excuse me, or expanded by other people and visions. But the reality is, you have to have your own vision for what you
Yeah.
want your business to be, right? So when you pleasantly surprised me and said you were interested in having a session, I was like, oh, okay, I can pivot, I can, in this conversation. And so what I like to set out is, so a VIP strategy session is, although I think we did around a little over 5 hours. It's, we spend a day together on Zoom, or if somebody wants to come to New York, I'm happy to do in person. But the idea is, we get together on Zoom, and we work through a specific plan over the course of two substantive work blocks to get you through your to get you to what we agreed to is your ultimate goal for the day. So it starts with us actually having a kickoff call, which we had. You had so nicely laid out in advance some goals of where you thought you wanted to be. Some clients don't necessarily take that initiative to start, so I send them a really comprehensive intake form so that I have that ahead of the kickoff call. And then we get on that kickoff call and we discuss everything that's on the intake form or in a document like you provided, and then we agree what the goal is going to be for the day, so that when you're done with your strategy session, you know what you're leaving with and where we want to be. And I take this, as you know, pretty darn seriously.
Yes.
So then I go, and with our session and the information you provided, I might ask the client to gather more information and send it to me in advance on the kickoff call. We'll discuss that so that you know what you need to provide. I always follow up, and so you know exactly what needs to be sent to me in advance. And then we start the day and we work through. Usually at that point, I will have mapped out exactly what the day will look like and what we're going to be covering in our 2 work blocks, and send it to the client in advance, to you in advance, so that you know. And then we start working through it. We take a lunch break so that you can attend to life and business, and maybe do a little research if there's some work that needs to be done before the afternoon. Sometimes there's work I need to do before the afternoon that comes out of the morning session, which happened with us. And then we do an afternoon, and then when the session's over, I always want to make sure that you've gotten what you expected out of it. I'm taking copious notes. Everything's being recorded, and there's transcripts for all of the sessions. And
Yeah.
then I'm taking post session everything we discussed and formatting it and putting it in documents that you can then use and move forward with, whether it's a spreadsheet or Google Docs, and you'll have a comprehensive plan. I then set up tasks. There's a tool that I use to sort of, gather information, and then you send follow up tasks, because you have access to me for a month afterwards, right? So I want to make sure that whatever we create in this magical day together, that is not it's not just sitting on a shelf. That doesn't work for me as a coach and a business,
Right.
consultant. So I want to make sure that you're actually executing and moving forward with what we said. So you'll have tasks created. You have access to me for a month on email, and I use a tool called Boxer, which allows to send voice memos. Although this new tool I'm using also has voice memo. Basically, you have access to me to celebrate wins. Like sometimes, like things
Mhm.
come up, it's like, oh my god, this is working. Like, great, please let me know, or
Right.
ask questions, or just make sure that that plan is moving forward. So that's a VIP strategy session.
Yeah, and if I can like just kind of give my own interpretation of that strategy session that day, to me it was very bespoke. Like I already like I have like on my side screen here, I have my vision board. I know exactly where I want my business to go. Behind that vision board is a lot of critical thinking. I do that every August on my birthday. I take 10 days and I usually go to my own little like what's next retreat. But it's hosted and everything by me. But I really do like work through what I want to get going. But what I was feeling like is wasn't getting the momentum. And I think one thing for me, so the tools that you use for everybody that's listening, it's this beautiful portal. So instead of going, oh, where's that doc? Oh God, it's like, oh, I log into my portal. There's my, tasks that I've got to do, and I create this task. So what I did was I was thinking, well, what would I want as a coach? So I created this document like this little browner or brown noser, but I was like a little keener. But I actually had learned that concept where I could try to give you as much of a briefing on my business,
Yes.
where I wanted to go, where I felt I was stuck, and where I see myself based on this vision board for 2027. So I've set out for the next 3 years. What do I visually want? It's right there. Um, but I I felt like I needed that extra little, okay, let's go in and unpack each one of that. And really, let's look at how we can make it possible. And that's where you really, I think, elevated me because one of the things that we did, I think it was like mid-morning or even in the afternoon, we did some financial modeling,
Yeah.
some financial forecasting.
Yes.
And there's one thing to say, sure, I want to be an eight-figure CEO, and another to say, okay, well, how are you going to get there? And then another to actually write those numbers down.
Yes.
And that's something I have never done. Like I've done, well, okay, if I had, 100 people buy my program at blah, 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 then I would get blah, blah, blah. But I have never done, okay, like perpetual, what would happen if, and then build, 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 much like any business, like big corporate would do. There's the CFO, like, but I don't have a CFO, and I don't know what it is with money that I just that whole sort of I'm more on the creative than I'm on the financial. So yeah, sure, I'd like to make $1 million by the end of this year. Blah blah blah. But I've never done that. What you took me through, which was so helpful because it went from this okay, the big hairy goal to like, shit, I could actually do this. Like, and bouncing it off of you to say, do you think that's doable? And I'm pretty realistic. Yes, I know you have to have big goals, but then like, okay, like honestly, I am going to shoot for the stars, but let's be realistic. How can we make that work over a course of 3 years versus trying to cram it all in this year or even into next year? And I think for me, that was the best part of the session with you was it really helped me put the number on paper. And I told you after this little story, I digress now about 20 years. I guess my son was 2 and my daughter was like 8.
Mm.
And I was this single mom, raising my kids financially, everything 100% on my own. And it had been like a couple of years. Plus I was, trying to climb the corporate ladder at that
Yeah.
time. So I had a nanny and I remember back then, 20 odd years ago, or I guess it was 18 years ago, I was making about $90,000 a year plus bonus.
Hmm.
And so it would come in around about 110, I guess. And I thought to myself, I need to make more money. And so I rattled off my budget in an Excel spreadsheet, similar to what you were doing with me. And that's what it did. It took me back to that moment. And I wrote, what would be really great if in the next 6 months I could get my salary from 90 to 130 plus, bonus, which then probably
Yeah.
would have taken me to, I don't know, 160, let's say. And if it didn't happen, like, and that's that whole, now I'm just going to sound kind of corny, but I'm a big manifester
Yeah.
and I'm a big believer if you write it down, if you visually put it somewhere like on your screen where you're seeing it every day, then it's going to happen. And to me, that is the intuition that was just rising from my gut when you were doing that whole exercise for me. It became so real. So it took this sort of visual high level, and it really helped me get into it and see it. And so for that, I appreciated that. And I told you that story, and I don't know if that resonated with you or not, but I know it did. But yeah, it was just amazing. And then the afternoon was, all right, here's your, here's your 1 year plan broken down into 90-day increments. And, I've got to get it into my calendar. When can
Yes.
I start? Okay, I can start on it this time. And so it really helped me get organized and put me on the path for that growth strategy. And since that, I guess it's been 3 weeks since we had our session,
I think
2
so.
weeks
Two,
maybe.
2 or 3 weeks. Yeah.
I have started to implement some of those tasks already and check
Yeah.
them off my list. And it's feeling really good. And I just feel like I've got so much momentum. So to me, that's what a full day VIP session versus that monthly coaching,
Hmm.
which, like I had mentioned, I work better when I'm just like blasted with something. And so anyway, so that for everybody listening, that is how I interpret the time with Catherine. So
I know. I appreciate you sharing that. And, it's really, taking the numbers and mapping them out like we did across, because you had ideas for offerings, right? Like your core offering, which I know you love in terms of, your program and helping women launch businesses. I'm handing that mantle over firmly to you. You've done an awesome job. Um, so yeah, so as being your flagship program, but there's other things you wanted to do, and then we bounced ideas. It's like, well, is this a revenue generator or is this a marketing, approach to things? And then, not trying to do everything at once. I think that's one of the things that I found where I'm able to help the most is, founders like yourself, you come in and you there's all of these amazing ideas, and I say yes, just not all right now. Right? And there's a
Yeah.
time to layer things in. And sometimes it can be frustrating to hear that, but the reality is you're never going to get out of the gate if we don't start in what's doable now, right? And what's sustainable, because you want to be making money. You don't want to be burning yourself out. You want to be able to layer things in. So I think that was one of the beautiful things about the process with you is we were able to layer in some offerings and build them out and help grow participation in those offerings over, I think it was, in total almost 4 years, right? So
Yeah.
that was interesting, and see the math, right? And to see, oh, well, my goal, like I can actually do more, right? By the time we get
I
to
know.
2027, which to me was like awesome. I loved that, right? And so, like you said, we came up with some numbers, but like they're doable. I mean, they're stretch, but they're possible, right? And I love that word you
Hmm.
use that, right? Like I deal in possibilities. Seriously, like
Hmm.
that word is so important to me. Like that is what I want my clients to be able to see what's possible and then help them create that plan to get to what's possible. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so you came with that, goal in mind, which was perfect. So it was a pleasure. The whole day was a pleasure. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it was great. It was great. So what's next for you, Catherine? What's speaking of growth?
Speaking of growth, yes, exactly. What's next for me? So I've got, I'm continuing to build out my one-to-one and my VIP sessions, which I am super excited about. But I'm building out an offering that is a bit more specific around helping solopreneurs and small businesses make the right first hires for their business and really make the most out of building a team, because it's something that I was really good at and have been really good at. When I worked at the Fortune 500 company, I ran awesome teams, and I understand what it takes to grow a business and what the right first hires are. And I see founders often struggle there. So I'm working on something that is a bit more focused in that one specific area. That and enjoying
I
life.
love, yeah, I mean, I love that because you know what? As you are starting a business, it is super overwhelming, right? And so these like I see the women that are sort of graduating from my program, but my program is to first client.
Yep.
And so I think that makes it much more mentally attainable because when I think you think about starting this online business or an in-person business or a product or whatever, you start to think this magnitude is going to be so big that it
Yes.
becomes overwhelming. And the first thing people start to focus on are all the wrong things like, oh, I need a website, I need branding, I need a name. No, you don't. You don't. You don't. You don't. It's like, let's get the idea going. Let's test the idea and let's get your first client with like, let's just get your first client. And then, all right, now you can start to see the growth and it just makes it way more manageable. And then you'll realize, okay, now step in, Catherine, where you are saying, okay, well, here's where you probably need to offload some things. I personally have taken everything back.
Yes.
I made that mistake early in my business where I outsourced certain things in my business that I literally have been saying for the last 3 years, I have to make a change. I have to make a change because, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and it,
Yes.
expecting a different result. Now, during that session with you, I had already mentioned that here's where what I don't think is working. And through our discussion, it came quickly back to the realization I need to take that back in because that stuff was not giving me an ROI. And I need to put that money that I was doing into something that was going to generate an ROI. So now I've taken it all back. I am like quadruple busy now, but I am also learning from that. And that I think was a really good, just before we got recording, you and I were chatting, how it was a really good exercise for me to do that because now I can see it. Like I can see different things and think, oh, okay, I'm not going to do it that same way anymore because it wasn't working, but maybe I pivot this way with that particular area and see how that works. And I've already seen it working. So I've seen growth, I've seen, just different things happening, and I'm really super happy with it. Again, had I not gone into that session with you and really started to kind of pull the scab off of a few things. I really don't know if I know for a fact I wouldn't have been able to like clearly understand what I needed to make the decisions and make those bold moves, I guess. So yeah, so that's been really, really helpful. I would do a VIP strategy day every 6 months. It just makes complete sense to me. I'm like, I've been kind of an entrepreneur now for, 15, 20 years. So I am a
Yeah,
self-starter,
yeah,
but you do need that person
yeah.
and even like for my program, Passion to Profit Blueprint, sure, you can start your own business, you can take your own ideas and start it, but I will guarantee you that you will get more leverage and more momentum by joining a program where you are going to get that personalized, bespoke approach. Um, yeah, so
No, and I agree with you too. And it's just you don't realize that like how valuable getting the feedback is and bouncing the ideas and entering into a conversation around it, right? And you know what, we
absolutely,
can't all know everything, right? And even as coaches, I mean, I still need help, right? Like from other
absolutely.
people. It's not like I know it all. I definitely don't. And it's the perspective is invaluable. And what I love about what you're doing, and something you had mentioned before, like with your program, and I think it's so important, this idea of, and by the way, I'm challenging myself with it right now with this new idea I have, right? So it's why I'm bringing it up. You know, you take all of your research, you get feedback, you do everything, you put your offerings or product, whether it's a service or a product, you put everything together and you go out with the best assumptions, best knowledge, best ideas. And for sure, it is going to morph into something else, right? So don't,
Totally.
that's when the
Totally.
learning starts, quite frankly, right? And so that's not a bad thing. It was one of the conversations I had with somebody when I was doing the Instagram series a couple of years ago. She's like, "Oh, I wish I'd known sooner that I wasn't going to know what business I was in until I got into
Exactly.
business, right?" And that was such a good point to make. And even for me, I'm trying to remember, okay, well, like I have ideas around what this is going to be. And so I would say that for people that are in your program, like, it's fine. It's fine. To your point, like, I love that you're getting them to the first client because that's going to be like, that's the gold, right? Like, what is that person's
Yeah,
experience? And what are they, whether it's a product or a service, how are they experiencing you? And what is their feedback? Oh, cool. Now let me do this, right? So I look
absolutely.
at it anyways.
Just on top of that, there like a great example of that was one of the women that was in my program. She launched a in-person content creation, and I went to participate in that, first client event. And wow, it was just like I just saw it all unfolding. This idea, I saw her idea unfolding in real life, and how good she was at it. And then I'm all about the debrief. So we're debriefing in the car, and energy is high but low because you're exhausted, but you're still like on adrenaline. And I said, God, you know what would be really good? I heard so and so say this. Why don't you try this? And she was like, nailed it. And so then, so now she's tacked on another part of the service, but that came because she got her first clients and tried it. And then, like you said, it just morphed into something completely different. And the confidence that she has
Yes.
now to go out and launch that sucker to the world has been amazing. So it's just, yeah, it's like, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
That's so great. I appreciate you
Catherine,
sharing that. So yes, thank you.
yes. So Catherine, tell us, where can people find you? Where should we direct people to?
For sure. So my website is catherinedanesi.com. Super simple. Hopefully it'll be linked in the show notes. Um,
It will be.
and then in terms of social, I am on Instagram at Catherine Danesi and I'm on LinkedIn at Catherine Danesi. Those are my main two social platforms. And on my website, if you visit, I have a weekly newsletter I send out, which is generally, it's very, I mean, there's some promotion, but it's mostly information I'm sharing, things I'm reading, things I'm thinking about, and helping founders grow their businesses. So you'll find resources there. I include 3 resources every week, and there's usually a topic or a theme I'm covering. So this last 2 weeks has been actually around setting pricing. So sign up, and you will get a when you sign up on my website. There, I have a free self-assessment exercise around if you are ready to make a hire, understanding what that should look like, and you can grab the free
Okay.
resource.
I love it. I love it. And so for everybody listening, it's Catherine, Katherine, Danesi, Danesi. But I will put the links in the show notes. Catherine, you are amazing. Thank you so much for providing me with so much clarity. I'm so happy that we got connected on
Oh my God,
Instagram,
brilliant!
and how it's evolved and morphed into this relationship now. So wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to spending more time with you.
Thank you, Lynette. Pleasure.